My husband, while secretly flying his young, beautiful secretary to the United States to give birth, took care to call our estate manager, feigning instructions in an authoritative voice. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "remember to be discreet. Do not let my wife know anything." Mr. Sterling, a man who had served my family for over 30 years, calmly replied with a single sentence, a sentence that was enough to leave my husband speechless on the other end of the line and for his picture-perfect life to crumble from that precise moment. "Sir," Mr. Sterling's voice was firm, "Mrs. Hayes sold the $6 million mansion and left last week. I am Catherine Hayes, 32 years old and the only daughter of the chairman of the Hayes Development Group, a real estate giant. I grew up in luxury, protected and educated in the best possible way. I never knew the taste of the sevens, deprivation or hardship. And in my naivety, I believed my life would always be a dab-at path paved with rose petals, especially after marrying Ethan. Ethan was my first and only love. 3 years older than me, he was the lead architect at one of the group's subsidiary firms. He didn't have a distinguished family name, but he had talent, ambition, and a sleek, captivating appearance. He won me over with his intelligence, his chivalry, and his promises of a love that didn't care for material possessions. My father, a seasoned man in the world of business, hesitated at first, but, faced with my determination and Ethan's excellent performance at work, he eventually relented. Our wedding was a lavish event that filled the society pages. After we married, my father spun off the architecture firm and gave Ethan full autonomy to run it as both a wedding gift and a test. We moved into a $6 million mansion in the Hamptons, a gift from my parents. 5 years passed, and Ethan's firm grew by leaps and bounds, making him one of the youngest and most successful executives in New York. He loved and pampered me unconditionally. My life was filled with gifts, luxury brands, and extravagant trips. I believed I had the most perfect marriage in the world. Until that fateful night. Ethan came home earlier than usual, a bouquet of red roses, my favorite, in his hand. He hugged me from behind, his voice deep and full of affection. "My love," he said, "I have to go to a tomorrow for an unexpected business trip. There's a very big project that needs my supervision. I should be there for about 3 months. Will you be sad being alone?" My heart tightened a little. 3 months was a long time, but I was used to his travels. I turned around and wrapped my arms around his neck, trying to smile. "Your work is the most important thing. Don't worry. Mr. Sterling and I will take care of everything at home." That night, he was unusually attentive, personally preparing a candlelit dinner, telling me funny stories, and promising that after this trip, he would take me on a tour of Europe. I let myself be carried away by that sweetness, without the slightest suspicion. It was just the last kindness of a traitor before the final blow, the last meal of a condemned man. The next morning, like the perfect wife I was, I got up early to prepare breakfast, adjusted his tie, and carefully checked his luggage. As he was about to leave, I even handed him my newest iPad Pro. "Take this, it's more practical. Yours has been having battery issues. I'll keep the MacBook at backbook home. My wife is the best," he said. He gave me a resounding kiss on the forehead and left in a hurry. I stood at the door waving, watching his luxury car disappear beyond the gate, my heart filled with a vague sadness. Little did I know that the very iPad I had so willingly given him was about to become the time bomb that would detonate my perfect fairy tale world. That afternoon, after running my errands, I returned to the empty mansion. I remembered that I needed to send some important project files to a partner. Files I recalled saving in the photo album. I opened my MacBook, and my heart seemed to stop. Thanks to the iCloud Sync feature, which we had both forgotten to disable, all the images and data from the iPad I had given Ethan appeared before my eyes. And among the work photos and architectural drawings was a strange image folder, named with evident care and tenderness, "Little Angel." My hand, moving the mouse, froze. A bad premonition ran through my body. I took a deep breath and clicked on the folder. A series of photographs appeared. They were not photos of me, nor of him. They were ultrasounds. A 1-2-week fetus, a 2-0-week fetus, and the most recent, a 2-8-week fetus. Beneath each image were Affectionate notes that I immediately recognized as being in Ethan's handwriting. Daddy's boy, be strong. You kicked mommy today. I love you. And then I saw the photograph of a young woman smiling with happiness, her hand holding her pregnant belly and the ultrasound result in the other. That person was none other than Jessica Miller, the beautiful personal secretary Ethan had hired 6 months ago. I felt my body drain of strength, my throat dry, my ears ringing. I scrolled to the other photographs. Photos of them at a candlelit dinner, on vacation, at a Princess luxury resort, and even intimate, explicit photographs taken in the bedroom of Dal, an unknown apartment. But the final shock, the coup de grace, was in a PDF file saved next to them. I opened it, trembling. It was 2 business-class plane tickets to LA. The departure date was that very morning, the duration of the stay was 3 months, and the passenger names were Ethan Cole and Jessica Miller. At that moment, I could no longer cry. Everything was too clear. The 3-month business trip, the important project, it was all just a blatant lie. He had cheated on me, had a child with his mistress, and was now using my money, my family's money, to take her to the United States to give birth, to give his illegitimate child a perfect start in life. And I, the legitimate wife, still at home waiting for him, had been turned into a fool, a decorative figure in my own marriage. The pain turned into an icy hatred. I had given him everything. Love, trust, a career that others could only dream of. And this was how he repaid me. I slammed the laptop shut. The expression of pain and despair vanished from my face, replaced by a frightening calm. My father taught me to be a leader, not a victim. I was not going to fall, I was going to fight. I went to the house intercom and dialed a familiar number. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice no longer that of the fragile Catherine, but that of a true boss. Come to my office immediately. We have work to do. Shortly after my call, Mr. Sterling, who had been with my family since I was a child, appeared and entered the study. His frame was thin, his hair already gray, but his back remained straight, and his gaze always conveyed intelligence and dedication. He saw me sitting motionless in front of the MacBook. He saw the Telba images still on the screen. He said nothing, just sighed discreetly. A sigh, filled with compassion and an understanding that seemed anticipated. In that moment, alone with the person I trusted most, my shell of hardness began to crack. I let my head fall onto the desk, covered my face with my hands, and burst into tears. I cried compulsively, like a child. I cried for the years of deceived youth, for the pure love that had been stained, for the unborn child of that traitor, and for my own foolishness. The calm from a moment ago was just a mask. Underneath, my heart was shattered. Mr. Sterling remained silent, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. He did not console me, did not offer advice. He knew that in that moment, I needed to let the pain flow to wash away all the rose-colored illusions. When my tears dried, and only sobs remained, Mr. Sterling handed me a warm cloth and a glass of water. Are you feeling better, ma'am? He asked. I nodded, wiping away the last tears. Thank you, I whispered. Then, he said with a look that became extremely serious, we need to act now. Mr. Cole has not only betrayed you emotionally, but he is also taking steps that are detrimental to your assets and those of the company. I looked up. The weariness quickly gave way to vigilance. What do you mean by that? Mr. Sterling took a small flash drive from his jacket pocket and inserted it into my computer. He opened a file protected by several layers of passwords. Ma'am, he began, I started noticing irregularities in Mr. Cole's activities about 6 months ago. Following your father's instructions, I have always discreetly monitored the financial activities of the subsidiary companies, including Mr. Cole's architecture firm. And what did you discover? I asked, feeling my heart race. Mr. Cole used his Avabia position as director to approve several contracts with shell companies, which are actually his own front companies, to siphon a considerable amount of money from the firm. This money, he pointed to a number on the screen, was transferred through various accounts, and finally deposited into an account in the United States. I looked at the number, nearly $750,000. This amount was almost half of the company's registered capital. What does he plan to do with that money? I asked, my voice trembling. He is preparing for a TIO. New life in the United States, ma'am, Mr. Sterling replied in a cold voice. With that secretary and their child. This 3-month business trip is, in fact, an escape. He has no intention of returning. He wants to take all the people aid. Money, leaving you with an empty company and debts. Another stab, deeper, crueler. He not only cheated on me but was also conspiring to defraud me, to appropriate the assets of the very company that had made him famous. A company, built with my family's money. He wanted me to lose everything, love and money. Rage exploded within me, overpowering the pain. Very well, Ethan Cole, I clenched my teeth. If you want to play this game to the end, I will play with you. I raised my head and looked directly into Mr. Sterling's eyes. My gaze was no longer one of weakness and pain, but of the iron determination of someone cornered. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice firm and full of authority, the revenge plan officially begins now. I don't want jealous scandals. I don't want to lower myself to the level of those people. I want to hit him where he is most proud. His career and his money. What do you wish me to do, ma'am? Mr. Sterling asked, his eyes gleaming with readiness. The first thing, I said, is to immediately contact the best real estate agencies. I want to sell this mansion. Sell it now. Mr. Sterling was a bit surprised. But with such haste, you will lose a lot of value, ma'am, he cautioned. I know, I interrupted, but I need the liquidity to avoid future legal complications, and I want him to feel what it's like to come back and have no home to go to. Losing a little value doesn't matter. Tell them I will accept the offer from whoever pays in cash within 48 hours. I want him to realize that when you provoke a lioness, even if you run to the bourses in time, ends of the earth, there is no escape. Mr. Sterling bowed his head. Understood, ma'am. I will see to it immediately. He left, leaving me alone in the vast room. The tears had dried, the pain had transformed into strength. In this game, I would not only recover what I had lost, I would make him pay a much higher price. My order was given decisively. Mr. Sterling, with the efficiency of someone who had served a family of tycoons for decades, acted immediately. In less than an hour, the news that the owner needed to urgently sell a 10,000 square foot mansion in the Hamptons was sent to the top sharks of the New York real estate market. This mansion was no ordinary property. It was one of the most iconic residences in the area, built by my father with utmost dedication. Every detail, from the patio tiles to the security system, was the best of the best. Its market value at the time was no less than $6 million. And more importantly, it was solely in my name, Catherine Hayes, as my own property, a wedding gift from my parents. This was my ace in the hole. The news that a rare gem like this was on the market caused a frenzy, but the condition I imposed was what truly shocked everyone. A sale for $5.5 million, almost 10% below market value. The only condition was that the buyer had to pay the full amount in cash or by wire transfer within 48 hours. Mr. Sterling's phone did not stop ringing. Real estate agents, industry magnates, all incredulous. Mr. Sterling, is this for real? Why is Mrs. Hayes selling so urgently? Is the family in trouble? There must be something behind this. No one would sell a masterpiece like this for that price. Mr. Sterling responded consistently, following the script I had laid out. The family has an urgent personal matter to attend to. Mrs. Hayes does not wish to provide further explanation. Anyone with interest and financial capacity may come to view the house. We are not entertaining curiosity seekers. The mystery and urgency made the deal even more appealing. That very afternoon, a line of luxury cars stopped in front of my mansion's gate. They came not only to see the house but also to try to find out what was happening with Chairman Hayes's family. I did not appear. I stayed in the Taman second floor office, watching everything through the security monitors. I let Indo and Mr. Sterling handle everything. He showed them the house, presented the salve on the renter amenities, and repeated the condition of a single payment within 48 hours. Many hesitated at such a strict payment condition, but in the world of the super rich, there is never a shortage of those willing to seize a bargain. And that very night, a serious contender emerged. It was Mr. Arthur Vanderbilt, the Section owner of a large hotel chain and a respected figure in the business world. He inspected the house meticulously and did not say a word about the price. He only asked Mr. Sterling one question. "Is Mrs. Hayes certain of her decision?" Mr. Sterling simply nodded. "Absolutely, sir." "Very well," Mr. Vanderbilt said in a decisive voice. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I will be here with my lawyer and a briefcase with the deposit. If all the Seveners, Binatius documentation is in order, 24 hours later, the $5.5 million will be in Mrs. Hayes's account." Everything happened faster than I expected. The historic deal was closed in less than 12 hours. The next morning, punctually at 9, Mr. Vanderbilt and his team were present. All the paperwork was handled swiftly under the supervision of top law firms from both sides. I, in the role of an heiress in distress, only needed to sit and sign. When the last signature was made and the notification that the money had been transferred to my secret Swiss bank account appeared, I felt a true sense of relief. The first strike was a resounding success. I had transformed a real estate asset into a huge amount of liquid cash, ready for my next moves. The news that the Krapasicids Nats mansion was sold in a single day spread like an earthquake. Neighbors couldn't stop talking. My God, Catherine's house was really sold that fast. They must be going bankrupt. I heard her husband had business losses. Poor girl, so young, and already having to sell her house to pay her husband's debts. I heard all of dab.gob. This as the moving company arrived. I asked Mr. Sterling to have only my personal belongings and mementos from my parents taken away. All the expensive furniture, the pieces Ethan had personally chosen, were left behind. I didn't want to take anything that reminded me of that deceitful past. As I walked out the gate for the last time, I looked back at the house. This place had been my home, my paradise. Now it was just an empty memory. But I felt no sadness, because I knew this was not an end. It was a beginning. The beginning of a war in which I had already secured victory. The car that took me away did not go to a temporary place. It went directly to another luxury penthouse in the temporary place. Heart of the city, one of the properties my father had secretly left me. From here, I would rebuild my life, and also from here, I would watch the downfall of Soph, the one who betrayed me. While I was busy with my plans on this side of the Atlantic, in the United States, Ethan and Jessica were still immersed in their rosy dream. They had no idea that the house they planned to return to no longer belonged to them. My move was swift and discreet. While all of New York was buzzing about the flash sale of the mansion, I was already settled into a luxurious penthouse in one of the city's most secure buildings, where no paparazzi or private detective could reach me. From here, through the enormous glass windows, I could see the Braffest entire city, but in my eyes, New York was no longer a city of light but a giant chessboard. And I was the one moving the most important pieces. Selling the mansion was just the first step, a preemptive strike to cut off Ethan's retreat. But I knew it wasn't enough. He still had money, he still had other assets in the States, and most importantly, he still held the title of my legal husband. I needed to tighten the noose, to take absolutely everything from him, leaving him not a single escape route. The very next morning, along with my team of lawyers, I initiated the second step of the plan, liquidation and freezing of assets. The first task was to deal with the enormous fortune I now possessed. In addition to the $5.5 million from the house sale, I had another $2 million in my trust fund from my parents, held in various term accounts. In total, $7.5 million, a number capable of impressing anyone. I couldn't leave this money in domestic banks. I knew that as soon as Ethan realized what was happening, he would desperately try to freeze my accounts, using the law to demand a share of our marital assets. With the help of the best financial advisors from the Hayes Group, the entire $7.5 million was skillfully withdrawn and moved through various investment channels, from stocks and bonds to funds in Singapore. In the Singapore, and everything was legalized and transferred to a secret non-resident account my father had already prepared for me in Switzerland. In just 24 hours, on paper, Catherine Hayes in the United States became a person with virtually no HOSIS assets. While the money was being moved, I simultaneously took the decisive legal step. I sat down with my lawyer and signed the divorce petition citing irreconcilable differences and adultery. Attached to it were not sentimental lamentations, but a robust file of evidence that Mr. Sterling had collected. The photographs of Ethan and Jessica at the airport, the bank statements proving the siphoning of $750,000 from the company, and even recordings of his conversations with his mistress where he admitted to deceiving me. With this evidence, my lawyer said confidently, not only will we get a quick sections divorce, but we can also ask the court for an immediate asset freeze on all accounts and properties in Mr. Cole's name in the United States to ensure the enforcement of the judgment. And that was exactly what I wanted. I didn't need a single cent of those assets. The Audi he drove, the condo he bought for his parents, his meager shares in the Gannements architecture firm, all of it, compared to what he took from me, was a drop in the Blashen bucket. But I wanted them confiscated. I wanted him to taste the feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of having everything frozen, just as he had frozen my heart. The petition was filed in court, and just 1 day later, an emergency freeze order was issued. All bank accounts in the name of Ethan Cole were frozen. All transactions of purchase, sale, or transfer related to his assets were suspended. The net had been cast perfectly. In L.A., he was about to have no home to return to. In New York, he didn't have a cent left. He was completely isolated, without resources, like an animal trapped in a cage. Everything was completed in just 3 days. 3 days were enough to change a destiny. Sitting in my penthouse, I looked out at the East River flowing slowly, feeling a strange calm. I felt no joy, only the exhaustion of a mental battle. At that moment, Mr. Sterling entered, holding a vibrating phone. "Ma'am," he said, "it's Mr. Cole calling." I looked at the screen. The call was from a U.S. number. A week had passed since his departure. He was probably calling to check on his wife, whom he thought was at home anxious, and also to start giving orders to Mr. Sterling. I didn't answer, just handed the phone to him. "Answer it," I said, "and say exactly what I told you." Mr. Sterling nodded, answered the call, and activated the speakerphone. An arrogant and presumptuous voice, all too familiar, sounded from the other side. "Hello, Mr. Sterling. Is everything all right over there?" "Yes, sir. Everything is normal." "Great. Remember, be discreet. Don't let my wife know anything. Just say I'm always in meetings. If anyone asks, that's what you say. Got it?" I sat there, listening in silence, the same authoritarian tone, the same lie, without a shred of remorse. He had no idea that in a few seconds, his world was about to completely fall apart. The presumptuous voice of Ethan echoed through the speakerphone, filling the stopper silence of the penthouse. He was still immersed in his role as the all-powerful executive, convinced that everything in New York was under his control, that his docile wife was still at home waiting for him. Little did he know that the person listening to his orders was not just the estate manager, but also me, the wife he had just referred to. Mr. Sterling maintained his usual calm. He glanced at me as if seeking final authorization. I gave a slight nod. It was time. "Sir," Mr. Sterling began, his voice no longer that of a subservient employee, but firm and clear, that of someone delivering an undeniable truth. "There is something I think you need to know." "What is it?" Ethan's voice from the other end of the line still had an arrogant tone, slightly annoyed at being interrupted. "Did Catherine go on another uncontrolled shopping spree?" Mr. Sterling ignored the question. He spoke slowly, each word a hammer striking down Ethan's arrogance. "It's nothing like that, sir. Mrs. Hayes sold the $6 million mansion and left last week." A silence followed, a suffocating silence that lasted for a few seconds on the Fanglo other end of the line. I could imagine Ethan's face at that moment, the presumption vanishing, replaced by absolute shock. What did you say?" he finally managed to stammer, his voice failing, devoid of any arrogance. "She sold the house? Are you kidding me? Why would she sell the house? Who did she sell it to? For how much?" A torrent of frantic, panicked questions. He didn't ask why I left, or where I went. His first concern was the money. "Sir, I do not know the details," Mr. Sterling replied, maintaining his calm tone. "I only know that Mrs. Hayes completed all the procedures quickly. The House has a new owner, and she has already moved out. She did not say where she was going. Impossible. Impossible. I heard Ethan shout into the phone, mixed with the sound of something breaking. She dared to do that behind my back? What? Right, does she have to sell the house? That house is ours. Sir, Mr. Sterling responded coldly, the mansion is legally registered in the TP Tower. Name of Catherine Hayes. It is her separate property acquired before the Taxit marriage. She has every right to dispose of it. Another silence. This time I heard Ethan's ragged breathing. He had been cornered by the law itself. He knew Mr. Sterling was right. The house was the greatest asset he had always coveted, but it was something he could never touch without my consent. So where did she go? He asked, his voice now desperate. I do not know, sir. Mrs. Hayes left no message. She only said that if you called, I was to tell you that the charade is over. Charity? Yes. And, Mr. Sterling continued, delivering the final blow, she also asked me to tell you that she prepared a surprise for you. Perhaps you should check your bank accounts. Having said that, without waiting for a reaction from Ethan, Mr. Sterling decisively hung up the phone. The penthouse plunged into silence. I sat there, feeling no sense of satisfaction, just an emptiness. The performance had ended, but this was only the first act. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the luxurious rented apartment in L.A., a true nightmare was just beginning. Ethan, in shock after the call, tried to call Mr. Sterling back without success. He called me dozens of times, but my phone was turned off in a drawer. He called me dozens of times. His parents in New York. What? She sold the house? His mother, Amelia, screamed into the phone. Impossible. She really had the nerve. His father, calmer, but with an equally worried voice, said, calm down, son. It must be just a tantrum. Your parents will go see what's going on. But when they arrived at the mansion, they were met by a locked iron gate and an unfamiliar security team. We're sorry, this is private property. You cannot enter. Panic fully set in. Ethan started checking his accounts. He opened his banking app and froze. All of his accounts in the United States, from his checking and savings to his investment portfolio, displayed a message in red. Account frozen. By court order. He didn't have a single cent to his name. His only hope was his international credit cards. He hastily checked the limits. They were still available. He let out a sigh of relief. At least he still had money to maintain his luxurious life in LA, to take care of Jessica and their unborn child. Little did he know it was just a false sense of security, that an even bigger trap awaited him. The shock of having his US accounts frozen shook Ethan, but he tried to remain calm. He convinced himself it was just an act of anger on my part, and that as soon as he returned, a few sweet words would fix everything. Besides, he still had his international credit cards with high limits, enough to continue his luxurious life in L.A., and keep his mistress Jessica by his side. He had it all planned. He would let Jessica have the baby there, secure American citizenship for the child, and that would be his trump card to negotiate with me. When he returned, he still believed I loved him so much that I would be willing to accept anything. He didn't tell Jessica the whole truth. He just told her that the company in New Matters, Jessica the whole truth. York was going through some problems, that the accounts were temporarily frozen, but that everything was under control. Jessica, a woman who only knew luxury, didn't care much. As long as Ethan could pay for her shopping and expensive dinners, the rest didn't matter. They continued their life of excess. Ethan spent even more on purpose as a way to assert his status and hide the growing fear inside him. And then the second blow, the fatal blow on American soil, came on a sunny afternoon in Beverly Hills. That day, after a routine checkup at a prestigious obstetrics clinic, Jessica insisted that Ethan take her to Rodeo Drive, the Rodeo Drive shopping paradise for the super rich. She had her eye on a pink crocodile skin Hermes Birkin bag, a limited edition. My love, she cooed, clinging to his arm. I'm about to have the baby. Buy it for me, as a celebration gift. When our son is born, I'll need to carry a lot of things. Although his heart sank at the price of the bag, which ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, Ethan, to maintain appearances and please his beautiful companion, agreed. If you like I'll get you anything you want. They entered the luxurious Hermes store. Ethan took out his American Express Centurion card from his wallet, the powerful black card he was so proud of. He handed the card to the saleswoman with an air of confidence. The saleswoman smiled and swiped the card, but the smile vanished from her face, replaced by an arch expression of embarrassment. She swiped the card again, and then a third time. "Sir," she said, looking up with an apologetic tone, "I'm sorry, but your card has been declined." Declined? Ethan was petrified. Impossible. Check again. My card never has problems. Sir, I've tried several times. The system indicates that the card has been blocked by the issuing bank. All eyes in the store turned towards them. Jessica, who had been excitedly trying on the bag, blushed with shame. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she whispered. Annoyed. "Did you forget to pay last month's bill? What a disaster." He quickly pulled out another card, a Visa Infinite. "Try this one." The result was the same. "Sir, this card has also been declined." It was then that Ethan panicked. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He took out all the cards from his wallet, all of the highest tier, but the answer was always the same embarrassed shake of the head from the saleswoman. All of his credit cards, the ones he thought were limitless, had been blocked. He didn't understand. They were all supplementary cards linked to my primary account. How could I have blocked them? He didn't know that as the primary cardholder, and with the backing of a top legal team, I had every right to do so. I had let him spend for a week only to gather more evidence of his extravagant lifestyle. "My love, I'm sorry," Ethan said, turning to Jessica, stammering. "There must be some mistake at the bank. How about we come back another day?" But Jessica had lost her patience. She threw the Birkin onto the counter in anger. "A mistake? I don't think there's any mistake. Ethan, tell me the truth. You're broke, aren't you?" "No. Of course not," he denied hastily. "Then why don't your cards work? Don't try to fool me." They started arguing right there in the middle of the luxury store, under the curious and disdainful gazes of the other customers. Finally, Ethan had to drag Jessica out of the store, humiliated and ashamed. The real nightmare began. Without credit cards, the cash they had brought with them was almost gone after days of excessive spending. They were trapped in the United States, in a luxury hotel they could no longer afford. The clinic where Jessica was registered for childbirth began calling, demanding upfront payment for the tens of thousands of dollars delivery package. The fairy tale romance was quickly replaced by constant arguments about money. "I can't believe you let it get to this point. You promised me the life of a queen. Our son is about to be born. Are you going to let him be born on the street?" Jessica's accusations were like knives in Ethan's already shattered ego. He had lost everything. Career, home, cars, money, and now even the mistress for whom he had risked it. All was turning her back on him. But in his desperation, an idea came to him. He still had one last card to play. A card he believed could turn the game in his favor. While Ethan and Jessica faced their financial nightmare in the United States, in New York, I took the next step of my plan. To disappear completely. After selling the mansion and freezing Ethan's assets, I did not return to my family's estate. I knew it would be the first place he and his family would look for me. Instead, Mr. Sterling and I moved to another penthouse, one of my family's secret properties, atop a skyscraper in the city center with a multi-layered security system. The first thing I did in my new home was to break my old SIM card, the one that held all the contacts from my past. I started using a new number, one that only Mr. Sterling, my father, and my legal team knew. I also deleted all my social media accounts. Catherine Hayes, the docile wife, the heiress of director Ethan Cole, had officially vanished from the world. I didn't do this out of fear. I did it so that Ethan would taste the panic and helplessness of not being able to find or control me. I wanted him to live tormented by questions. Where am I? What am I doing? And what will my next move be? His panic arrived faster than I imagined. In the United States, after the shock of the blocked cards, Ethan called me incessantly. Dozens, hundreds of calls to the Prevent. A number that no longer existed. At first, there were messages of insults and threats. "Catherine, what the hell is this game? Unblock my cards now. You think? You can scare me? Don't push it. But upon receiving only silence in return, his tone began to change. The arrogance disappeared, giving way to confusion. Catherine, I'm sorry. Where are you? Pick up the phone. I know I messed up. Come back, let's talk. We can work this out. And finally, desperation. Please, please, answer me. I'm really broke. Jessica is about to have the baby. You can't be this cruel. I read these messages, forwarded by Mr. Sterling through a valve monitoring system, without feeling any emotion. Cruel. Compared to him, abandoning me so carelessly, my actions were all too human. Unable to contact me, Ethan called our mutual friends, but they all received the same instruction from me. I'm fine, but I don't want to be disturbed. No one knew where I was. No one could give him any information. He was screaming into a void. At the same time, my father and Mr. Sterling discreetly executed the next steps. They didn't just withdraw capital. They initiated a deliberate rumor campaign. The information that Ethan's company was drowning in debt, that he was on the Tepefex verge of bankruptcy, was skillfully spread in business circles. The remaining partners, those who had not yet been affected by the capital withdrawal, began to get nervous and look for a way out. Ethan's company, already shaken, was now on the brink of collapse. Ethan, far away in the United States, could only watch helplessly as his empire disintegrated through the increasingly rare calls from the few remaining employees. He tried to fly back to New York to resolve the situation, but without money and without credit cards, he couldn't even buy a ticket in economy class. He was truly trapped, cornered in the luxury trap he himself had created. My disappearance, my silence, proved to be the most terrible psychological torture. It forced him to face his impotence, to taste the feeling of abandonment, the same feeling he had inflicted on me. In my luxurious penthouse, I looked out the window at the city. I knew that somewhere far away, a man was desperately looking for me, but he would never find the old Catherine again. The person he would have to face would be a completely different Catherine, one who would decide his fate. My disappearance was like a ghost haunting Ethan day and night. He was trapped in the United States, without money, without power, only with a growing sense of doubt, impotence and fear. But the person who felt this collapse most acutely was not collapse. Ethan, but Jessica. What had attracted her to Ethan? His elegant appearance, the sports car, the designer gifts, and the promise of a future as the wife of a rich man. She agreed to get pregnant, to follow him to a foreign country, all for the promise of a life of luxury, for her son to have American citizenship and a fortune. But now, all those promises were crumbling before her eyes. Jessica's dream of social climbing quickly turned into a nightmare. They were kicked out of the 5-star hotel for not being able to pay and had to move into a cheap motel in a rough neighborhood. The obstetrics clinic where she was registered constantly sent overdue bills, threatening to refuse her delivery if the hefty costs were not paid in advance. Dinners at luxury restaurants were replaced by instant noodles and fast food. Jessica, an influencer used to be pampered, had never known deprivation. This sudden change was unbearable for her. The fairy tale romance was quickly replaced by constant arguments. Ethan, look at yourself, she would scream in the cramped room with a musty smell. What did you promise me? You promised me a queen's life, and now I have to live in this dump, without even enough money to buy prenatal vitamins. Shut up. Ethan had also lost his patience. You think I want this? I'm trying to fix things. Fix things? How? Jessica laughed with contempt. By sitting there, pulling your hair out, and calling someone who never answers? Ethan, I don't care who your wife is or what she does. I only know that our son is about to be born, and you have to take responsibility. She began to state her demands, the demands of someone cornered who only thinks of herself. There are only 2 options now, she said in a firm voice. Either you call your parents, tell them to sell their house and send us the money, or you sell your shares in the company right now. Are you crazy? Ethan shouted. My parents don't have that kind of money. Their house is the only place they have to live. And the company's shares are all frozen. How am I supposed to sell them? I don't care. Jessica screamed, tears streaming down her face. That's your problem. If you can't take care of me and your son, don't blame me for being cruel. I'm not going to let my son be born in this hellhole. She started pressuring him. She threatened to leave, threatened to have an abortion. She used the very child in her womb as a tool to blackmail the man to whom she once swore love. Ethan was at a dead end, trapped between his missing wife with a fortune and his increasingly desperate pregnant mistress. He tried calling his parents, but all he heard was crying and lamentations. They were also in dire straits, facing the 7-0 and Esta 7-0's contempt of their neighbors. In his desperation, Ethan did something crazy. He resorted to loan sharks, signing contracts with exorbitant interest rates just to get some cash to placate Jessica and pay the hospital bills. He didn't know that this action was the final nail in his coffin, that he was digging his own grave. He pushed himself down a path of no return, a path where he would pay a much higher price than just the loss of money. In New York, through Mr. Sterling's network, I was aware of all his movements. I knew about the arguments, Jessica's betrayal, and Ethan's loan. I did not intervene. I just watched in silence. This was the karma they had to face. The boat of their love, built on lies and materialism, was now sinking in the open. While Ethan struggled with debt and his mistress's criticisms in the United States, in New York, I knew it was time to deliver the final blow. He was financially broke, emotionally wounded. It was time to completely destroy the Krasavins. Enti and Prasavins. Last thing he clung to. His title as a talented executive and the architecture firm he was so proud of. I did not act directly. My father and I devised a more subtle plan, an attack through the tabloid press. The very weapon that people like Ethan used to use was now being turned against him. Mr. Sterling, through some anonymous internal sources, skillfully leaked information to a few tabloids and social media pages specializing in scandal news. The information was not the whole truth, but a deliberately distorted half-truth. Architecture firm CEO flees to L.A. with $750,000 of company funds and his mistress. Ethan Cole, a portrait of a con man who abandoned his wife, robbed his company to build a new love nest abroad. Sensationalist. Headlines accompanied by partial but extremely convincing evidence. Photos of Ethan and Jessica at the airport that I provided, statements of some foreign transfers corresponding to the $750,000 he siphoned, and anonymous testimonies from former employees about the executive's extravagant lifestyle. A perfect story was constructed. An incompetent executive who used his looks to deceive, and after emptying the company's coffers, fled, leaving behind chaos and desperate shareholders. The media storm exploded. Public opinion, already curious about the rapid collapse of Cole Architects, now had an answer. Outrage grew. People insulted Ethan, calling him a scoundrel, a con man, a modern-day Casanova. The consequences came faster than the news spread. The remaining shareholders of the Taum company, who had invested their money in Ethan's talent, were furious when they read the news. They realized they had been deceived. They went to the company headquarters demanding an explanation, demanding their money back, but were met by an empty office and disoriented employees. The partners, who were still hesitant now, had a justified reason to walk away. They cancelled contracts and mass filed lawsuits demanding compensation. The ship named Cole Architects, already with a hole in its hull, was now shattered by the furious waves. Ethan, in the United States, could only watch helplessly as his virtual empire collapsed through his phone screen. He tried to call New York, tried to defend himself. It's not true. I didn't run away. I was set up. But no one believed him. In everyone's eyes, he was just a con man, trying to justify himself. His parents could only cry, helpless. They tried to defend their son to neighbors and relatives, but were only met with contemptuous looks and whispers behind their backs. Like father, like son. They're all a bunch of crooks. The humiliation, the shame reached its peak. They had lost everything, not just money, but also honor, something they once valued more than life itself. Meanwhile, I remained in my penthouse, silently observing all the developments. I felt only a cold sense of justice. This was the price to pay for betrayal. He wanted to build a bright future on my suffering. Now he would have to sink into the ashes he himself had created. The media storm I created swept everything away, leaving behind the ashes of Cole Architects and the honor of the Cole family. Ethan, from an acclaimed young executive, became a con man, condemned by society. He was trapped in the United States, not only without money, but also without a way out. Life in the cheap motel room became increasingly suffocating. The debt to the loan sharks grew daily. Jessica, with her ever-growing pregnant belly, had also lost patience. Their arguments were no longer about Hermes bags or luxury cars, but about every meal, every dollar spent. "Ethan, what are you going to do?" Jessica screamed, pointing to the final notice from the hospital. "They say if we don't pay this week, they won't admit me. Are you going to let me give birth on the street?" "I know. Stop yelling." Ethan had also lost his temper. He was pulling his hair out. "I'm trying to find a solution." But he had no solutions left. Friends had turned their backs on him, partners were suing him. His family in New York was also in trouble. He was truly cornered. Finally, after many sleepless nights, facing the harsh reality that his American dream had shattered, Ethan was forced to make the most bitter decision: to return. To return to New York, to face the chaos he himself had created, and most importantly, to find me his last lifeline. But even returning was not easy. Without money, he had to swallow his pride and seek help from his family to buy 2 economy-class plane tickets home. The 15-plus-hour flight from L.A. to New York was probably the longest and heaviest flight of their lives. They didn't exchange a single word. Ethan was immersed in anxiety and fear of what awaited him at home. Jessica remained inane, silent, looking out the window, but certainly planning her own escape. Her dream of being a rich man's wife was over. The plane landed at JFK Airport on a humid afternoon. When Ethan and Jessica, looking tired and dejected, carrying cheap suitcases, walked out of the arrivals gate, they were not greeted by family. "Mr. Cole, where have you been?" "We've been going crazy looking for you." A group of menacing-looking men, led by a burly man, surrounded them. They were his creditors, the shareholders he had deceived, who had read the news of his escape and had been waiting for him at the airport for days. Who are you?" Ethan turned pale, instinctively pulling Jessica behind him. "Who are we?" The burly man laughed. "We're your creditors. You took your friend's money to go enjoy life with your mistress. And now you pretend you don't know us?" No. There's a misunderstanding," Ethan tried to explain. "What misunderstanding?" Another man interrupted. "It's all over the news. If you don't pay us today, you're not leaving this airport." The crowd began to push and insult. Jessica, pregnant, screamed in fear. The scene became chaotic. Other curious passengers gathered around to watch, taking photos and filming with their phones. And of course, the reporters I had arranged were also there, recording every detail of this dramatic reception. The image of the once elegant executive being surrounded and insulted by creditors at the airport quickly became another breaking news story. Finally, airport security had to intervene. Ethan and Jessica were taken to a security room to give statements, but when he came out, he was completely broken. The humiliation and shame had reached their peak. He had not returned as an executive, but as a criminal. The stormy reception at the airport was just the beginning of Ethan's series of humiliations. After being released by airport security, he and Jessica had nowhere to go. The luxury apartment rented for Jessica had been repossessed by the landlord. Our mansion had been sold. The only option left was to take his pregnant mistress to live temporarily with his parents in a modest house in the south suburbs. An executive and an influencer crammed into a tiny space, facing his mother's criticisms, his father's frightening silence, and the disdainful looks of the neighbors. The picture-perfect life had completely crumbled, leaving only a raw and dead-end reality. Having lost everything, with no other alternative, they had only one last resort, the most desperate and shameless of all: confrontation. One morning, while I was having breakfast with my father in the tranquil garden of our family estate, the maid came to us, looking flustered. "Sir, Miss Catherine, Mr. Cole and his parents are at the gate. They are demanding to see you." My father and I exchanged a look. The final act we had anticipated was about to begin. I stood up. "Let them in, Mr. Sterling." Show them to the formal living room. I went up to my room, put on a simple but elegant dress, and applied discreet makeup. I wanted to appear composed, an untouchable wife wronged, to see how they would play their hand. I entered the living room to find the three of them waiting, looking out of place amidst my family's old-world wealth. As soon as they saw me, Ethan's mother, Amelia, rushed forward, her voice a mixture of accusation and feigned concern. "Catherine, what is the meaning of this? You can't just destroy my son's life and disappear. This family is in ruins because of your tantrum." Ethan stepped forward, a pained and rehearsed expression on his face. He reached for my hands, but I pulled back. "Catherine, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please, you have to forgive me. It was all Jessica. She manipulated me, she set me up. I was a fool, but I only ever loved you. We can fix this." His father remained silent, a grim look on his face, but his presence was meant to add pressure. They performed their roles brilliantly, the aggressive mother, the repentant husband, the stoic patriarch. They were trying to corner me, to guilt and intimidate me into a settlement, portraying me as a cold, unforgiving wife. I remained silent, letting them exhaust their arguments. I looked at the present man before me, the same one who had betrayed my trust so completely. I looked at the mother-in-law who had once encouraged his ambition at my expense. Their words were hollow, disgusting. When their pleas and accusations died down, I spoke calmly, my voice devoid of emotion. "Are you finished?" The three of them were stunned into silence. "If you are finished," I continued, "now it's my turn." I gestured to Mr. Sterling. With a serious expression, he placed a tablet on the coffee table and turned it on. On the screen was not a video, but a series of audio files and images. "A setup?" I laughed coldly. "Then let me show you who really set up the trap." I clicked on an audio file. My mother-in-law's familiar voice sounded complaining to a friend. She saw that her husband was having a little trouble, and immediately ran off into the arms of another man, you know? I clicked on another file. This time, it was Ethan's voice whispering with Jessica in a hotel. "As soon as that idiot wife of mine signs the papers, we'll have everything." I moved on to the photos. Ethan and Jessica in a romantic mood in L.A. Statements of the secret transfers he made to her and messages, where they planned how to extort money from me. "Look," I said in a firm voice. "Is this being the victim of a setup, or is it a meticulously calculated plan by your dear son?" My in-laws turned pale, their faces drained of blood. They couldn't believe that. All their actions, all their words, were in my hands. Ethan was also stunned. He didn't understand how I had gotten all of that. He only knew that his repentance act had failed spectacularly. "And what's more," I said, delivering the final blow, I showed them Ethan's bank statement, which showed large, unexplained transfers. "What did you use this money for, Ethan? Do you want me to say it, or would you prefer the police to find out for themselves?" I was referring to the $750,000 he embezzled from the company, a crime that could land him in prison. Absolute fear was etched in Ethan's eyes. He knew I didn't just have proof of his affair. I had his freedom in my hands. The plea for mercy had turned into a trial. They had come hoping to turn the tables with threats and guilt, but they were mistaken. They faced a completely different Catherine, someone who no longer believed in tears, only in evidence. The confrontation at the estate ended with the overwhelming defeat of the Cole family. They left with their heads bowed, not with the hope of forgiveness, but with a deep-seated fear. They knew I was no longer the naive Catherine of old. I had in my hands enough evidence to send Ethan to prison. The game was completely in my hands, but I didn't act immediately. I wanted to give them more time. Time for fear to eat away at them. Time for their internal conflicts to explode. And I knew that the weakest link, the first domino to fall, would be Jessica. Indeed, a few days later, a new play began, even better than the desperate confrontation from my in-laws. Jessica, after returning to New York humiliated with Ethan, stopped receiving the luxury she was accustomed to. She was forced to live with his parents, facing her mother-in-law's criticisms, her father-in-law's frightening silence, and an uncertain future. The pregnancy was advancing, childbirth was approaching, but there was no money. The dream of dream, being a young executive's wife had vanished. And when a pragmatic woman doesn't get what she wants, she becomes extremely dangerous. She began to pressure Ethan. Ethan, what about the money? You promised you would take care of me and our son. Now you're going to let my son be born in this miserable house? I'm trying to find a solution. Ethan stammered, already devastated, and now powerless against his mistress's accusations. Give me more time. Time? I don't have any more time, Jessica shouted. If you can't solve it, I'll solve it my way. And her way was to turn against her own lover. One morning, I received a call from an unknown number. It's me, Jessica. Her voice on the other end of the line was no longer spoiled, but cold and calculating. What do you want? I asked. I want to meet you. We have a common enemy, and I think we can cooperate. I couldn't help but smile with disdain. Cooperate? How ridiculous. But I agreed. Anyway, I wanted to see what tricks that cunning fox had up her sleeve. We met at a discreet cafe. Jessica looked more haggard, but her gaze remained sharp. She got straight to the point. Mrs. Hayes, I know you want to destroy Ethan, and I have what you need. She placed a phone on the table. Inside here, she said, is all the evidence of his illegal dealings. The shell contracts, the money laundering operations, the bribes to partners. He used to brag and tell me everything. Little did he know I recorded it all. I was stunned. I never imagined she could be so Machiavellian. She had been preparing her escape route for a long time. Why are you giving this to me? I asked suspiciously. Because he betrayed me, Jessica said, her voice filled with resentment. He promised me a future, but now he wants to push me into a dead end. I won't allow it. I need money, a lot of money, to compensate for my lost youth and to take care of this child. She looked me in the eyes. Give me $200,000, and in return, I'll give you all this evidence. You can use it to ruin him, even send him to prison. And I'll take the money and disappear forever. Fair trade. I looked at her, a beautiful young woman whose soul had been corrupted by money. I felt a mixture of contempt and pity, but I did not agree. Do you think I'm that stupid? I laughed coldly. I don't need to spend a cent to get that evidence. If I present what I already have in court, he'll be in trouble anyway. And you, as an accomplice, won't escape either. Jessica's face turned pale. She hadn't expected me to be so firm. But, I continued, I can give you another option. Instead of selling me the evidence, why don't you use it to talk to him directly? Jessica's eyes lit up. She understood my intention, and the play of self-destruction began. That same afternoon, Jessica met with Ethan. She, no longer cried or accused him. She placed the phone on the table and played the phone recording of one of his money laundering operations. Ethan was paralyzed. I couldn't believe the mistress he trusted so much was holding a knife to his back. Choose, Jessica said in a cold voice, either you transfer $500,000 to me as compensation, or all of this will be on the police's desk tomorrow morning. Ethan completely broke down. He had no money, no power, and now he was being blackmailed by his own mistress. He tried to beg, to make promises, but Jessica no longer believed a single word he said. The confrontation between the two traitors reached its climax. They insulted each other, assaulted each other, verbally and physically. Mr. Sterling, who had been discreetly following him, recorded the entire scene. The two people who once embraced in luxury hotels were now devouring each other like wild animals over money. The treachery of human nature was exposed in the rawest way. The love built on lies and materialism could only end in betrayal and hatred. The war between Ethan and Jessica was like a tragicomedy, where two former allies in deceit were now turned against each other. Ethan, cornered, no longer had the money to meet Jessica's demands. He had to sell his last valuable possessions and even take out more loans from dubious sources, but it still wasn't enough. Desperation and pressure turned him into a different person, always living in fear and paranoia. While they were destroying each other, my divorce proceedings finally reached the court. That day, I entered the courthouse, no longer as the suffering or vengeful Catherine. I felt only a strange calm. I was there not for revenge, but to put an end to a wrong chapter in my life. Ethan was also present, but he was just a shadow of his former self. He was thin, with deep dark circles under his eyes, and an empty gaze. He sat on the other side, unable to face me. The hearing was quick. With all the irrefutable evidence my legal team presented, from the photos of the affair, the statements of the company embezzlement, to a signed confession from him, all of Ethan's defense arguments became futile. His lawyer still tried to argue that marital assets should be divided, that Ethan's career was also an asset built during the marriage, but my lawyer immediately refuted it. Your Honor, he said firmly, Mr. Cole's career, as we have proven, was built entirely thanks to the support and influence of my client's family. It was not the result of a joint effort but part of a marriage test that failed. Furthermore, with his acts of adultery, betrayal, and systematic fraud, Mr. Cole has gravely violated marriage and family law, causing irreparable moral damage to my client. Finally, the verdict was delivered, clear and decisive. The court granted my petition for divorce. Full custody of my son was awarded to me. Ethan was deprived of visitation rights until he could prove a change in behavior and psychological stability. As for the assets, the $6 million mansion and my entire trust fund were confirmed as my separate property from before the Teal marriage. I retained full possession. The nearly $750,000 that Ethan embezzled from the architecture firm were classified as a personal debt, obliging him to reimburse the company, which, in the meantime, had become my property. Upon hearing the verdict, Ethan had no reaction. He sat there, head bowed, like someone who has accepted their fate. He had lost everything: wife, child, career, money, and the future. With this judgment, he not only left empty-handed, but also carried a colossal debt, a debt he would probably never be able to repay. I won the case. A legal, absolute victory. But as I left the courthouse, breathing in the air of freedom, I felt no joy, only an emptiness. The war was over, but the wounds remained. After the trial, everyone's life took completely different paths. I started a new life. I officially took on the role of vice president of the Hayes Group, immersing myself in work as a way to find myself again. I dedicated all my love to my son, trying to make up for everything so that he would have the most complete childhood possible. As for Ethan, after losing everything, he fell into misery. Hunted by creditors, including the loan sharks and Jessica herself, he had to flee. He lived in hiding, without a home, without family, friends. The price of betrayal is sometimes more terrifying than prison, and the day friends weighed on his conscience was perhaps his greatest torment. In the long, lonely nights, he must have asked himself countless times why he had been so foolish, why he had destroyed with his own hands a happiness that others only dream of. The divorce trial ended, but its repercussions lingered. The lives of the people who had passed through my story now took dark turns of their own choosing. Karma, like the most patient of collectors, came knocking on every door. The first to face it was Jessica. After unsuccessfully trying to blackmail Ethan and realizing the luxury ship she was on had sunk, she quickly tried to escape, but she underestimated the cruelty of the loan sharks. Since they couldn't find Ethan, they started harassing her, considering her an accomplice. The life of an influencer, admired by thousands, was over. Jessica had to live in hiding, constantly moving, always in fear, while her pregnant belly became an impossible burden to conceal. Finally, without money and without support, she had to give birth alone in a public hospital. A baby boy was born, but instead of joy, he brought her only more burden and despair. She had no money for milk, no ability to care for such a small being, and in her desperation, she did something that will probably haunt her for the rest of her life. One morning, Mr. Sterling gave me the news. A newborn had been found abandoned on the doorstep of Ethan's parents' house in their suburban town, along with a brief farewell letter from Jessica. In the letter, she said that he was Ethan's blood and she was entrusting him to his family to raise. As for her, she had nothing left to lose and was going somewhere far away. Ethan's parents, already devastated by their son's collapse, faced a new tragedy. They didn't know what to do with the baby. They had no money or strength, and above all, they weren't sure if he was even their grandson. Doubt, remorse, and the burden left them completely exhausted. And then karma finally caught up with Ethan. After months on the run, living in misery and fear, he was caught, not because of the debt to the loan sharks, but for another crime. With the evidence I provided about the embezzlement of $750,000, the FBI issued a warrant for his arrest for wire fraud and embezzlement. The day he was arrested, his picture in the fraud newspapers shocked me. The man in the photo was thin, with sallow skin, a scraggly beard and unkempt hair, a lost look in his eyes, without any trace of the elegant and charming executive of yesteryear. He paid too high a price for his mistakes. The sentence was 12 years in prison, a just punishment for his betrayal and unbridled greed. When I learned he had been arrested, I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not pity. For me, Ethan died the day he betrayed me. Now, he was just a name in the past, an expensive lesson I would never forget. I could finally close that chapter of my life, but the image of the innocent, abandoned baby wouldn't leave my mind. He was not to blame. He didn't deserve to suffer the consequences of his parents' mistakes. After many sleepless nights, I made a decision. I didn't contact the Cole family, but discreetly, through a DASD charitable foundation, sponsored by my group, I sent a monthly stipend for the Revenature baby. It wasn't a huge amount, but enough for him to have a decent life and access to education. I did it not for Ethan, nor to be virtuous. I did it for my own human conscience, and because I didn't want another child to grow up in deprivation and resentment. I never told them who the benefactor was. I just wanted to be a silent guardian, ensuring that little boy would have a better future. My life slowly returned to normal. The work at the group was going better than ever. My son, Andrew, was growing up smart and well-behaved. He was my whole world. But sometimes, in the quiet nights, I still wondered if, after all these storms, my heart would be able to open up to a new love, or if the scar of betrayal would remain there forever as an indelible reminder. 3 years had passed since that fateful day in court. 3 years. Enough time for the waves to calm and the deepest wounds to begin to heal. My life finally found the word peace. A peace I thought I would never achieve again. I was no longer the Catherine living in an ivory tower, nor the Catherine consumed by hatred. I am a mother, a businesswoman, and a woman learning to love herself. Again. Under my leadership and my father's, the Hayes Group prospered. But my greatest success is not measured in revenue figures or multi-million-dollar real estate projects. My greatest success is Andrew. My son is now 4 years old. A smart, perceptive, and very affectionate little boy. He is my little sun that illuminates my entire world. I dedicate all my free time to him. We read together, build Lego castles, and go to the park every weekend. I want to make up for everything. I want him to grow up in an environment of love and security. As for Ethan and Jessica's son, I continue to support him discreetly through the foundation. I learned his grandparents named him Daniel. They are raising him in their small town. I heard that after everything that happened, Ethan's mother changed a lot. She stopped being greedy and arrogant and now lives a quiet life, dedicating the love she has left to caring for her unfortunate grandson. Perhaps it is her form of redemption. I thought my life would continue like this, serene, just me and my son. The scar of betrayal, though healed, still made me wary of new relationships. I had built an impenetrable wall around my heart. Until one day, a man appeared and patiently melted that wall of ice. His name is Michael, and he is the lead architect on a major project my group is collaborating on. He doesn't have Ethan's flashy good looks. He has a mature, calm demeanor, a gentle smile, and eyes that speak. The first time we met was in a tense meeting. While I was vehemently criticizing a design proposal, he didn't argue. He just listened in silence. Later, he presented a completely new proposal, one that not only solved all the problems I pointed out but exceeded my expectations. His talent and humility attracted me. We started talking more, not just about work. He told me about his travels, his passion for photography. I told him about Andrew, about the bakery I always dreamed of opening. By his side, I felt a strange peace. He didn't try to win me over with pretty words or expensive gifts. He was simply there, listening, understanding, sharing. He knew about my past. All of New York knew. But he never asked, never showed pity, just looked at me with deep respect. "You were very strong," he said once. "Anyone who goes through what you went through deserves to be happy." Our feelings grew naturally, slowly, like a stream winding through rocks. And what moved me most was the way he treats Andrew. He doesn't try to replace a father figure. He approaches him like an older friend. He teaches him how to build models, plays soccer with him, and tells him stories about the stars. Andrew, usually shy with strangers, took to him immediately. One weekend afternoon, while the three of us were flying a kite in the park, Andrew suddenly turned to me and asked, "Mom, can Michael come over to our house to play all the time?" I looked at Michael. He was also looking at me, his eyes full of expectation and hope. I smiled. A smile that truly came from the heart. I stroked my son's hair. "If you like him, of course he can. Happiness sometimes arrives when we least expect it and in the simplest ways." My story could have ended here with a happy ending, but life always has unexpected chapters. A few months later, near Christmas, while Michael, Andrew, and I were shopping in a supermarket, I saw him again. Ethan. He was a security guard at the supermarket, thin, in a baggy uniform, his face marked by the wrinkles of hardship. He saw me too. He saw me happy, next to another man. He saw a child on that man's shoulders, laughing joyfully. He quickly looked away, trying to hide in a corner as if he wanted to escape his own past. Our eyes didn't meet, but for an instant, I saw it all in his slumped shoulders. The regret, the remorse, and a pain that would never go away. I said nothing. I just squeezed Michael's hand and continued walking with him. And my son. The past was finally behind me. Everyone has their path, their choices, and the price to pay for them. I chose forgiveness, not for him, but for myself. I chose to move forward, not to find a replacement, but to find true happiness. And I found it. Happiness is not a destination, it's a journey. A journey in which I learned to love, to trust, and most importantly, to get up. After every fall, stronger and more resilient. I looked at my son laughing, at the kind man by my side, and my heart filled with gratitude. The storm had passed, and after the storm, the sky was incredibly blue and clear.